You're listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everybody, this is Mark Ballo from the Jersey Guys Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Tom Coyne, and we've got a brand new episode for you today. Today we've got Tim Brown from the band Striker. They're a new wave of traditional heavy metal band out of Edmonton, Alberta. And we're going to talk to him today about the band's upcoming tour and the history of the band, so let's get right to it. Hey everybody, this is Mark Ballo from the Jersey Guys Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Tom Coyne, and today we've got Tim Brown from the band Striker. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate the talk.
Oh, no worries.
I figured I'd start off, and I wanted to ask you, I know you guys got a new album in the works and a new tour coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have a full North American tour with Beast in Black, which is a power metal band from Finland and other parts of Europe, as well as Seven Kingdoms is the other support act on there, and they're from Florida. So some pretty good global heavy metal representation on the tour. So that's really exciting, and we have some new songs coming out in support of that tour. So those haven't been actually released yet, but we did show one of them off, our song Death Wish, which came out late last year. And then we have, more cool new tunes. So we've been trying to incorporate some new influences. So the 3 songs that are coming out, the first was Death Wish, and then we have 2 more coming out before the tour starts. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for those.
Excellent. Yeah, Death Wish was a great song. Is that part of a new album that's going to be coming out?
Yeah, we're doing a bunch of recording, and we did some recording over the COVID holidays, if you want to call it that. And it's a sort of difficult time for everybody, so we sort of reevaluated what we're doing and how we're doing it, stuff like that. And we've recorded some songs, so we finished 3 songs, and we're sort of working on a bunch of other ones at the moment. But yeah, we expect to have some more music out. We also have a summer tour over in Europe, so we'll have some more songs out for that as well, and then have the full album out hopefully by the end of the year.
Excellent.
So Tim, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the current lineup that's going to be going on the road. I know you have a new drummer, and is Chris in the band or out of the? Have you replaced him, or is he still in the band? I'm actually not sure.
Yeah, so Chris Sager was one of the founding members of Striker, and then he took an early retirement back, the mid-2010s or so, when right after the release of our album City of Gold. I think that was in 2014. And then we got our friend Simon, who coincidentally is also a bald dude, so they get confused quite often. And Simon was our guitar player for a couple of years there. He was sort of a session guy, because he also ran his own band called The Order of Chaos, which our new drummer Jono was also part of. So it was sort of Simon and Jono had their own band, and then Chris eventually wanted to come back, so we're like, yeah, sure, of course, we're all good friends. And then Chris was back with us for a couple of years. We released our last album, Play to Win, with Chris on guitar. And then, during the COVID, Chris got some, life changes. Chris got some really good opportunities for his work and stuff like that. And he decided to make another retirement. So Simon's back in the band. So it's Simon and Jono are full-time members. So really looking forward to recording, writing music with those guys. We had our 3 original songs like Death Wish and the two other ones that are coming out before our tour were recorded with John. So he's playing on that, but Simon will be on the other new stuff. So we haven't finished the rest of the album, but Simon will be on that. So that'll be really fun and exciting.
So this would actually make you the second longest tenured member of the band currently.
Yeah, I think I have, how many albums do we have? 6 albums.
I believe you were on 1, 2, 3, 4.
Got to check the Striker Metal archives. I always forget what's going on.
I got you on Play to Win.
Playing so many shows. I recorded on 4 Striker albums.
Right.
And then obviously Dan, our singer, he's been on all of them. I think Chris was on 1, 2, 3. He was also on 4, I guess. My brother Adam was on 1, 2.
Adam goes back before you.
3. And then we also had Randy Black, who is the current drummer from Destruction.
Right.
He was our session drummer because Adam broke his arm, and so he's played on 2 albums too. So we've had a lot of different people playing and filling in, stuff like that. So it's fun that people are interested enough to want to play with us.
Yeah, I got to see you guys in 2018 in Brooklyn, and then I saw you in 2019 on a co-headliner with Holy Grail in Brooklyn. And
yeah, nice.
Yeah, and the show in 2018, I don't know if you remember it. You guys opened for somebody who was the hot.
Unleash the Archers?
Yes, exactly. What I remember about it was I probably have been dating back to the 70s, hundreds and hundreds of shows. It was the hottest club I was ever in my life. People were literally stripping during the show. It was like a 90-degree day, and it was no air conditioning in the club. It was packed, but it was great. And when I saw you in 19, it was the co-headlining tour with Holy Grail, so you did a longer set, and it was with what I thought was the best lineup of the band, with your brother and Chris, yourself. So it'd be interesting, I plan on going in May to see you guys when you play in Brooklyn again with a somewhat different lineup.
Hell yeah. I remember that show, because we were wearing leather jackets and stuff on that tour,
Exactly.
And then, literally on stage,
Yeah.
Dan, whatever he would put his hand down, water, I guess sweat would just be literally coming out of his sleeves.
It was the
sleeves
hottest show I ever remember being in my life. It was great, but it was just unbelievably hot.
Yeah.
That was at a place called Gold Sound, I believe it was called, in Brooklyn. Then I saw you guys in a different place when you co-headlined with Holy Grail. But looking forward to this show too. Now, when you go on the East Coast, you're going to become headliners? You're not going to be opening anymore?
Yeah, so our last show with Beast in Black is in Detroit on May 2nd, I think it is, something like that. Let me just pull that up so I'm not talking out of my ass. So much information to remember is kind of makes it tough sometimes.
Sure.
So yeah, our last show, I was right, is May 2nd in Detroit with Beast in Black. And then we do a little bit of headlining on the East Coast. So our only show after that is in Brooklyn, and that's at Kingsland.
Kingsland, right.
Which is, yeah. And then, then we head up to Canada and make our way home. We do Quebec City, Montreal, Ottawa, and Winnipeg at the Manitoba Metal Fest before we head home. So it should be a lot of fun.
Nice.
I mean, we're
looking
forward to it. So, yeah, the whole Beast in Black tour, I mean, it's pretty crazy. They're a fairly new-ish band, at least relatively speaking, compared to, bands that we normally tour with who are like from the 80s or 90s or whatever. So it's cool to be touring with some younger bands, especially ones that are getting so much success as them. I mean, you look at their Spotify numbers or something, they have 100 times more monthly listeners than us and stuff like that. So it's just oh shit.
But that's great exposure. Yeah, that's what you really want, though.
Yeah.
That's
make an impact on the fans.
So before we run through the albums, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your influences, bands that basically formed the sound of Striker, which to me is a very vintage 80s band that reminiscent and harkens back a lot of bands that I loved from the 80s, like Vicious Rumors, Lizzie Borden, those type of more aggressive but yet melodic bands. Were these bands that you guys were influenced by, or is it just by happenstance that you sound kind of like that?
No, absolutely. We were influenced by all those types of bands, exactly. I mean, I remember way back in like high school or whatever, 20 years ago, there was a show on Much Music, which is the equivalent of MTV, but the Canadian version. And they had, it's called Power Hour, and they just would play like 80s heavy metal. And I remember at the time, like, you know, you're 14, 15, whatever, and you don't really have, you know, heavy old school like thrash isn't played on the radio in, you know, the early 2000s and stuff. And it's just like, you get your first taste of, you know, Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast, or like, you know, some Judas Priest, and you're just like, oh, what the hell is that?
Right.
Whoa. And it's just like totally mind blowing, you know, hearing like old school Metallica when all you've heard is Enter Sandman or Whiskey in the Jar. And it's just like, wait, this is Metallica?
Right.
And so, you know, it at least for me, it really, you know, set me off on my lifelong heavy metal journey. And same for Dan. So Dan was really big. Well, he still is, I guess. Once a fan, always a fan. But he's also really big into Vicious Rumors, like you said. That's one of his favorite bands. But yeah, we've all been praying at the altar of heavy metal for decades here.
We actually did a podcast with Dave Starr from the original Vicious Rumors lineup a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
And before I set the whole thing up with Dave, I had been in contact with him for a while. And I told him, I said, I know of a band that reminds me a lot of you guys, like, you know, the Carl Albert later 80s sound that you guys had. And I sent him some of your songs, and he didn't know the band, and he was blown away by how good it was. And
awesome. Thanks,
yeah,
man.
we talked a lot about it, but what I have seen, one of the things that drew me to you guys when I, you know, found out about the band, probably going back into the days of the early EPs, was how the vintage sound was really captured. And I know a lot of bands under this new wave of traditional heavy metal movement are going for that sound, and some get it, some don't, some miss the mark a little bit, but you guys have consistently, I thought, from every album, you know, some albums being a little heavier, some albums being a little not as heavy, but have captured the sound. And it's a hard sound to capture. If you could talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, that's always been sort of a huge source of our influences. I mean, just for me in general, like if you're looking at decades of music, for me, my favorite kinds of music has always been just 80s music in general. I think, you know, when I look at music, I took some like popular music courses in university and stuff. And I found it was really interesting, like in the 40s and 50s, it's a lot of sort of like big band stuff. And then you start to get into, I guess like Elvis and the Beatles a little bit in the 60s and whatnot. And, that's sort of when there was a lot of, I would say, experimental, I wouldn't call it like pop music, but popular music.
Right.
So, you know, in the late 60s, early 70s, you get a lot of stuff where if you're listening to, you know, a top 40 rock radio or whatever, there's actually a lot of really interesting, well-made music in it. Not to say that, you know, modern music doesn't have those same kind of elements, but I think you know, if you listen to like a Boston album or something like that was something that was new and hip at the time or whatever. But all the people in the band, because they're recording to tape, right? I mean, they're awesome musicians that are like second to none. You take a band like Toto or something like that.
Right.
You know, they had to do a good job, and the reason it sounds good is because they are really good musicians. They spend a lot of time with their music, and a lot of those the people in the band were the people actually making the music. They were the ones writing it, recording it, all that stuff. And I think that style of music creation sort of peaked in the 80s, and I think that's kind of when it started to get really commercialized. and you see a lot of the breakout success of people, you know, sort of like Madonna, who, yeah, she is performing the music, but that's when you see a lot of, I think that's when the music industry, right at the end of the 80s and early 90s, that's when it sort of changed to, you know, they saw the success of bands like, I don't know, New Kids on the Block or Madonna, I think is a good one, where they're getting other people to write the music for them, getting other people, they're like outsourcing all of the elements that a band from the 70s or 80s would have created themselves. I mean, if you look at a band like, I don't know, let's take Toto just because we're fans of Toto.
Well, you're preaching to the choir
but
with Toto. We're both massive fans of Toto, so.
Yeah, I mean, like, they have so many kick-ass albums and so many kick-ass songs, and you're just like, wow, this is a really good, well-made music. And, I mean, I like some modern music as well, like top 40 stuff or popular style music. But I think they just sort of nailed it down and are making a lot of music, I would say almost algorithmically, where it's not quite the same as music from the past. So we've always been really interested in that kind of old school sound. And I think what it really comes down to is just having people playing music that are also, you know, spend a lot of time and are invested into the music and then also want to make it sound good. So I think that's a really easy thing to fall into making music nowadays, is that everything is automated. You can make everything on your computer at home, I mean, which is what we do. But at the same time, it's really easy to get really lazy with it. Like, you could, you know, there's a lot of bands, and I've been in studios where it happens, where it's like the guitar player isn't very good, but, you know, due to the wonders of modern Pro Tools and whatnot, you can just punch in every single note and, you know, just fake it, which, you know, it sounds okay, but that's not going to be a replacement for actually having a good musician that can actually play. So
yeah, and then what happens when you go out live and try to play?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's I think for us, just that old school sound is just something that resonated with us, and sort of that way that you make the music as well. I think a lot of other bands sort of in the genre, you know, contemporaries of ours, there's a lot, and I think they do some good stuff too. But at the same time, at least for us, we've always had a really big set of influences, and we weren't necessarily afraid of exploring those, where I think a lot of other bands are kind of like, oh no, I don't want to do anything too poppy, that's lame. And I think that's where a lot of bands sort of aren't as maybe interesting to metal audiences. I mean, if you look at someone like Dio back in the day, like, yeah, he's heavy metal, there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, I mean, like, there's a lot of really great, just general pop influences. And when I say pop, like, if you talk to, well, I guess you can't talk to Dio anymore, but if you like watch it, interviews and stuff, like, he's a huge Beatles fan. Same with like Black Sabbath, you know, like Ozzy always talks about how much he likes the Beatles, and that a lot of those bands from the 80s had those influences from earlier in time, like I was talking about. So we're big fans of both the 80s bands and the bands that they were influenced by. I can't remember who said it, but if you want to make music like a band or an artist, you have to be listening to the music that influenced them and not the music that they made. So if you want to sound like Metallica, you know, you don't listen to Metallica necessarily. You're going to be wanting to listen to Metallica's influences, and try to, you know, recreate how they got there. So it's, and I mean, that was what we did. So, I mean, I remember when I got into heavy metal, and same with Dan, it's kind of like you find your sort of gateway bands and you're like, oh, cool. Like, I remember Metallica, and then, you know, you start to read up on it a little bit. Oh, who are their influences? You know, Diamond Head. Okay, cool. What the hell is that? I'll go check that out. Right. Or same with like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. Is like, oh, who did they tour with back in the day? Oh, cool. I'll check that out. So that's sort of what we did, just looking for heavy metal. And I mean, we got super deep into it back in the day, you know, just underground, filthy, disgusting metalheads, just, you know, having our scholarly talks about heavy metal history.
Well, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that what you said a minute ago, because as a fan, I did the same thing when I got into a band. Like I was, as you were talking about that, I was thinking of a band like Dream Theater that I really got into in the 90s, and I think about it when I got so into them. I said, where did they get their sound from? And I went back and I started looking at some of the stuff that they were influenced by, just like you said. So that's really interesting that you, as a band member, are looking the same way at that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's basically an infinite amount of music out there, and it's really hard to kind of filter out what you want and what you don't want. I've found, like, if I'm just on like Spotify, for example, and I go to the metal playlist or whatever that Spotify puts on, like, that's not metal that I want to listen to, at least for me personally. And so for me, the best way to find music isn't to go to these like editorials or whatever. It's ask either my friends who, I enjoy their taste of music, or just looking at bands that are related to other bands that I like. So, if you're looking at band X and then you go check out their Spotify, or there's a lot of resources now. Like even their Wikipedia and stuff. It's like you can see who they tour with, you can see who they were influenced by, all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, I'm going to go check out bands like that band.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's sort of what we do these days, and it's great these days. It's never been easier to check out music. I mean, when I was getting into music, that's right around when Napster first popped up. And I remember being like trying to download these obscure like old school 80s metal albums and whatever, and then you spend all night downloading the album and you listen to it and someone had mislabeled it and it's like missing a song or something screwed up. So it's way better now. And it's just a lot easier to check out music and find what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
Well, you're from a country that has probably, in my opinion, back in the 80s, was the best underground metal bands were out of Canada. Whether it was Kick-Axe, Helix, Coney Hatch. There were just an endless amount of great bands that really never made it big, but had a loyal following that played the same type of music that you guys are doing right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, the Canada's version of MTV, Much Music, where I was listening to that Power Hour, they played a lot of the Canadian stuff too. So I definitely got a good history lesson there on all the old school Canadian bands. And it's cool because we played with a lot of them. Like we played some really awesome shows with Annihilator, played with bands like Anvil and stuff like that. So it's cool that we can, you see these guys on TV like years ago or whatever when you're getting into music, and then you end up playing with them, and which is really awesome.
I wanted to ask you also, how much was the new wave of you mentioned Diamond Head. How much was the new wave of British heavy metal an influence for you and other guys in the band?
That was a huge influence. I think it's probably, well, I guess the new wave of British heavy metal was a huge influence on like the 80s thrash scene, especially like the Bay Area thrash stuff. And I really enjoyed the Bay Area thrash bands, Metallica, Megadeth and stuff. And then, like I was talking about, sort of investigating their influences, and then, checking out bands like Tigers of Pantang, or obviously like the bigger ones like Iron Maiden or Priest. I mean, those are two awesome bands that I love. But there's like thousands of bands that we checked out. I mean, I remember my old school like computer friggin' like 20 years ago, just gigabytes of music that I torrented or downloaded off Napster or whatever, and it's all this like old school weird stuff that, I remember having like a friend and they said, "Oh, what are you listening to?" "Oh, check it out. It's freaking Def Leppard's very first album."
Right.
And then they're like, "Oh, okay. You want to listen to it?" And they're like, "Ugh, this sounds terrible." Because, a lot of those old school metal albums in particular, like back in the early 80s, the like mixing and mastering technology isn't comparable to what you can produce today. So, especially if you're not used to that kind of sound, it's hard to listen to.
There was a label in the UK called Ebony Records, which had some of the great bands of that era, but their production was, if you ever listen to the first two Grim Reaper albums.
Oh yeah, Grim Reaper's awesome.
Awesome, but those first two albums, the production is just, I mean, it becomes campy and almost like likable after the years, but I remember I'm old enough to remember when those records came out, and the production was almost like laughable. It was so bad. But the material was so great, and, and Grimmon's vocals, made it. But yeah, the production on a lot of that stuff was very, very lacking.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, definitely. That's a cool thing that I really like about modern music is that the production is really great. So, you put it on and your like speakers explode,
right?
Compared to old school music. But yeah, Grim Reaper's awesome. So is Lionheart.
Yes, those Lionheart records.
Sort of next bag.
I actually got to see him. Tunes. He played in Brooklyn also about 2013, 2014, before he had his medical issues. And I had also seen him in L'Amour's in the 80s, and his vocals hadn't changed at all. He was just tremendous, and the crowd was packed to the gills. You couldn't get in the door. Yeah, Grimmett has always been, I thought, like one of the unsung great singers of that new wave of British heavy metal scene.
Yeah, for sure. I was always taken aback by how awesome of a singer he was. Is. But like that old stuff, it's so awesome. It's just like they're these super catchy.
Yes.
Yes. Metal, but it's also like there's so many hooks in it. So yeah, Grim Reaper is we're big fans of Grim Reaper, especially growing up. I think there's what the hell is the song on one of the Striker albums? There's I think
it's one of the EPs. I actually have the vinyl of it. Yeah, that there was
You Wish You Were Never Born.
Exactly. That's right. It was the third album. Yes, there was on one of the early EPs. There was a cover of that. So what I wanted to do now is trying to work backwards with some of the albums, starting with Play to Win. If you could tell us a little bit about the recording and the songwriting and how the whole album came together.
Yeah, well, for that album, we just writing tunes. I mean, what we usually do is everybody just writes whatever music they want, and then we sort of get together and we go through all the different demos that we had, and I think we had probably, let's call it about 50. So it's not necessarily like a fully finished song, but 50 ideas. And then we kind of narrow out most of it. I think we came down to like 15 or 20 songs, and then we worked on that, and then it's like, okay, and then you do another round of cuts, and you get down to like 12 songs maybe. I mean, we're like, okay, let's work on these songs, and then eventually cut it down to what's on the album. So on that one, there's 10 songs, and we just kind of, that's sort of how we wrote the songs. And yeah, it's since we went independent, split ways with Napalm Records, we've just been recording ourselves. So we're all really good recording engineers and stuff ourselves. So everybody has the ability to record themselves, and we're all really good at that kind of stuff. So we've been self-producing and self-recording for the last 3 albums, and then also our newest one. And yeah, we just sort of take the same process, but especially with our newer stuff, Play to Win and our new upcoming album, we've been really taking a fine-tooth comb to it and really spending a lot more time. I think one thing that we really tried to do in Play to Win was fill out every song. So like every section has hooks, every section has something that's interesting, just something that catches the ear. Whereas maybe in the past, you write a song and you kind of like, I don't know, it sounds good, and you just kind of put stuff together, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think with Play to Win in particular, we really started using the my favorite songwriting tool, which is the garbage can. And if a song or a part of a song doesn't work, just get rid of it. So that's sort of what we've been doing a lot more. And instead of trying to like polish a turd, as they say.
Right.
Just get rid of the turd, man. Just flush it.
It's a very concise record. I liked it a lot. There was no weak songs on it, and I thought it flowed really well. And I think there was a little bit of I use the word commercial, but there was a little commercial atmosphere of some of the songs, which I think is good in the sense of, like we were talking about Dio. If you look at the third Dio album, Sacred Heart, which is my favorite album, some of the songs were more accessible. And I think that's a good.
Sure.
When you have a singer like that you have in your band, I think you should take full advantage of that and do heavy stuff, light stuff, progressive stuff. Because when you have a guy with those pipes and you're writing those type of good songs, you could run the gamut of styles.
Yeah, for sure. So that's sort of what we do. We usually just end up writing music that we like, and then recording our favorites out of it. So. And like I said, we like all kinds of music. So I know a lot of bands. Obviously, if you're in a professional band, you love music and whatnot. But I think a lot of bands kind of get scared of diving into music that isn't, like badass metal or whatever. So for us, we listen to all kinds of weird stuff. You're stuck in a van for 8 hours a day on tour. You got to listen to something. So we try out all kinds of different songs on the road, just listening to stuff in the van. And some of it's really great and it has nothing to do with metal. It's just like weird whatever. And we've always been trying to put those influences in. And I think that hopefully it makes our music a little bit more interesting to listeners.
Well, I think it keeps you from falling into like a very specified, where people know what the next record is going to sound like. It's going to be cut from the same exact mold as the record before that. And I think that is kind of a trap that a lot of young bands that I listen to fall into. They get the one record that gets some moderate degree of success, and then it's a cookie cutter. And you guys haven't been like that. As we go through the next couple of albums, I'll expound on it a little bit more. But you've run the gamut from like real heavy, but yet still catchy, and then more commercial hard rock also, which kind of mixes it up. And like for me, I like that.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned, Toto was a huge influence, especially when we were writing Play to Win. So obviously Toto has some huge commercial hits. And so for us, it was just, we like those songs just because they're, just because they went number one or whatever,
right,
doesn't mean that I think a lot of people would be like, oh, like top 40 song, that's lame, we're not going to listen to it. But for us, we're just like, yeah, that's a badass song.
If you say that, right? You're not listening. I actually saw an interview with Luke at the one time, and I always remember this thing he said. To be heavy, you don't have to be loud. You don't have to be, breaking down the walls to be heavy. Certain songs are just heavy, and they're not, speed metal, or it's just a groove sometimes, or a guitar break, or a vocal phrasing that could define it and actually be something that in its own right is heavy.
For sure.
So we're going to move to the next record, which was 2017 Striker. If you could talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, in that one, again, sort of similar writing process. We sort of been writing music in generally the same kind of way the whole time we've been making music. That one, I think our first couple of songs that we wrote for that one were Former Glory and
Pass Me
Born
By.
to Lose, which are
Born to Lose.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Those are our first couple songs that we wrote for that, and we're kind of like, hey, these are pretty badass. Well, let's write more music like this. And it's kind of, again, we were big into Toto at the time, and it was kind of interesting because we did Stand in the Fire, which is the album before that, the self-titled album, which is the one we're talking about, and then Play to Win. We put out 3 albums in 3 years, and it was just kind of like, go, go, go. And as I mentioned that we record all of our stuff at home, it's pretty easy for us to pump out music once everybody agrees that we like it. So it's we had released Stand in the Fire. It was really successful. We got some really good opportunities, like touring with Primal Fear, doing some festivals over in Europe. I think we did our first U.S. tour as well with Artillery, and it was just really motivating. And so we got off the road from that stuff, and I'm like, well, what else are we going to do? We don't have a tour lined up. Let's just record another album. So that's just kind of what we did, and it turned out pretty good. There's some weirdness in the mix for us, but it turned out pretty good. We got nominated for a Juno for that album, so that's a Canadian Grammy basically. So that was really exciting.
It's kind of I thought style-wise similar to Play to Win. It's songwriting I thought was kind of similar. Maybe a little more, again, a little bit more commercial than the two records before it that we're going to get to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think in that one it's sort of, I guess we sort of matured as people, and we're kind of like, it's okay to give in to your cheesier influences. You don't have to be scared of it. Who cares, right? It's just music. It's not like, I remember being in like elementary school and Backstreet Boys and like Spice Girls came out, and if you dared say that you enjoyed it, you'd be like bullied incessantly. And it's like, whatever, man. We're all in our 30s now. Nobody cares if you like.
And you know
whatever.
What? At the end of the day, it's the quality of the song. It really is. The lasting power of any great band has been the quality of the song. So whether you're talking Dio, Led Zeppelin, they all had commercial songs that to this day people adore and had great success, while they had their hard side too. And that's one of the things I like about the band, is that you recognize you could do commercial songs and also, play really hard and heavy also.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're big fans of like pop music in general. Again, it's sort of like any genre of music. You don't like everything. Like I certainly don't like every metal song that I hear. Same with pop music. I mean, there's lots of pop music that I really like, and there's some stuff that I absolutely cannot stand. So it really depends. But yeah, I think on that the self-titled album, we really just sort of embraced that a little bit more.
So now we move to Stand in the Fire, which is a kind of a different beast from the two albums after that. If you could talk to us a little bit about that and the recording process and songwriting and influences.
Yeah, you bet. So on that one, that was our first independent album. So we had been on Napalm Records before that, and it was up to time for we had completed our contract and we're on sort of our options, and they gave us an offer, and it was like, hell no. And yeah, we just it took a little longer to get out than we had planned, because we go independent, you gotta make all these mistakes and figure out how to do it. And especially at that time, there weren't too many independent bands, metal bands. Like I remember just trying to get tours or work with promo companies and stuff. People were like, oh, you're not on a label? I don't know. But I mean, these days it's the norm. I mean,
yes,
all of our friends that are in bands, even bands that are way bigger than us, they, there's like, oh man, screw labels. I can't wait till my contract's over so I can go independent. Why would you ever be on a label? And it's like, I agree with that. So, I mean, once you get to a state where you absolutely can't handle all of the business activities that are going on, then yeah, it does make sense to be on a label. But until you get there, especially nowadays, there's no reason for it. So we sort of saw the writing on the wall back then, and we just wanted to take our music into our own hands. And, we had shopped around a little bit, send demos out, and then you get your typical label response from the music, and they're like, oh, what is this? This sucks. But that's just that's just a bargaining tactic. They're like, yeah, your music is poor quality, so we're going to give you, only $1,000 for a record deal, and then we're going to take all of your money,
right,
and just kind of like, man, go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we haven't really been too interested in labels these days. But yeah, for that album, it was pretty similar to our other albums. Just write a bunch of tunes, see what works and what doesn't, and then we just recorded it on our own. And that was sort of our first take at recording things on our own. And it's a little rough around the edges in some spots, but I think we did a pretty good job. Everybody, just worked on it until it was good, and just have just try to be open to new experiences and techniques and stuff with that album. And I think it turned out pretty good. I think that's a lot of people. That's one of their favorite albums.
I like that album a lot too. It's heavy as hell, but it keeps a lot of It has probably my favorite song. Phoenix Lights is on that, and there's an obscure cover that you guys did, and I've always been curious to know how you even stumbled across this band called China. And the song was called Sign in the Sky. Me and Mark are both big China fans, but it's a very obscure Swiss band. And when you covered that band, I was like, how the hell did these guys even know about this?
We know about all kinds of weird music, man.
That's cool.
We've heard it all. So, yeah, that China song, I think turned out really, really well. And I think it's actually one of my favorite guitar solos, at least, that I've done. And I was like,
it's
damn,
a brilliant song.
Really good.
It's just and that whole album is just. But that band never took. I mean, I don't think there's 20 people in the United States that even know who that band is. But
yeah,
they were pretty big in parts of Europe, and we were both into them. And that's when I saw that you guys covered that. I was like, where the hell did they come up with this? But you did a great job on it, because I was a huge fan of that band, and the original version of the song is tremendous. So to do a good cover on it, you really had to nail it, and you did.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you dig it. But yeah, like I said, we listen to all kinds of weird stuff. And when we were back in high school and, late teens, early 20s, it was just like, we're basically the heavy metal version of Gandalf, just going through the old text, just digging stuff up.
No, you're preaching to the choir here. We're both the same way. I've been that way my whole life. All right, we're going to move to City of Gold, which is another interesting record for me personally. I wanted to get your feelings on that.
Yeah, that was my first album with the band. We had written a whole bunch of songs, sort of similar to how we did the other ones, and then we we did a European tour, and then right after the European tour was done, we went straight into the studio at Studio Fredman with Frederick Nordstrom, who did a bunch of our other stuff, and he's a producer that did like all the Gothenburg Swedish melodic death metal stuff. So that was where we sort of really wanted to get into a more modern sound. So that's why we went with them. And that was our last time in a big studio, I guess. But it was a good experience. It was a little different because at least for the last couple of albums that we've done, we got to, just sit and screw around and experiment to your heart's content. But when you're in a studio, it's $1,000 a day. You gotta perform. So we were there for about a month recording, and it was a really great time. But it was like off in an industrial section of Gothenburg, so it's kind of like we're just in this warehouse all day, every day. And the only exciting thing that we would do was like walk down to the grocery store and buy beer. So there wasn't too much going on, but yeah, there's some good Striker tunes on it. But yeah, that was our first foray into like a heavier mixing and mastering.
Probably would you say it's the heaviest Striker album?
Certainly has the gain on the guitar amps cranked out the most, that's for sure.
Yeah, I thought so too. I love that. City of Gold, again, one of my favorite songs. The whole album was really, really strong songs, and different from some of the albums later on because it was real heavy, but also maintained, the great vocals and the riffs, which is everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to wind up moving into actually some albums or EPs that you weren't on, but your brother was, so we could still talk about them. One of them happens to be my favorite Striker album, which was Armed to the Teeth. And
that's a good one. Yeah,
that is a real good one. That's my favorite album by the band.
Oh, nice.
I thought that record kind of really merged in the commercial, catch you right away songs, but with that real Judas Priest late 70s, chug-a-lug guitars, and it really got the both ends of the band together on this album, I thought.
Yeah, that's a good album. I joined the band right after that album came out, so I did all the touring, and I think we played every single one of those songs live at some point, which is, we certainly haven't done that for any album since then. But yeah, it's a lot of great tunes on it. That one was
yeah.
done with Michael Wagner was the producer,
Mhm.
and he recorded it in Nashville. So, I mean, that was a guy that was doing all your favorite Ozzy, all your favorite
Yep.
Skid Row, stuff like that. So mixed, I think it was Master of Puppets, stuff like that. So super pro guy. I think Dan and Chris and Adam, they love telling stories about all the cool things that they learned recording with him. Like I said, he's a super pro guy. Yeah, he really had that, old school sound, which is what Stryker went to.
I really think that's the thing that got me with this. The songs were not only so good, but it really had. You could fool people and play this and say, this is a band you never heard of. They, put this out in '87, and I think you would fool most people. You really don't. I don't. That's how much it had that vintage sound. And it also
that's
had
what we were going for.
Yeah, and it had like something like Lethal Force, which was a total Vicious Rumors type of with the chanting choruses, and then you had something like really melodic and catchy like Fight for Your Life, which just had such a great riff and was much more mellow, not as heavy as like something like Lethal Forces or Let It Burn. This was a great record. It was real. I think this record set the stage for the band for what they are today. I think it put you guys on the map.
For sure, yeah. We had a lot of really great response from that. So, like I said, I joined and was touring that album. So, lots of people loved it. It's lots of great tunes on there for sure.
So then there were the 2 EPs before that, the Road Warrior and the Eyes in the Night, which they actually in Japan they combined them and made it a CD as a bonus CD when they put out this record we were just talking about. And I wanted to ask you, how did your brother originally? I know he was in the band before you. How did he meet with Dan, and how did you get recruited into the band?
Well, we're all roughly the same age. We're all from the same city, Edmonton, which is on the western side of Canada. It's a pretty small metal scene, I guess, in Western Canada. So, like, everybody knows everybody else. Everybody's played together at shows and whatever. So, my brother and I were in a band for a long time together called Six Gun, and we had played shows with Stryker. Before they were Stryker, they were in a band called Final Spine. And so, like, when we're all in high school playing together at, like, these, crappy bars and whatever, sneaking in and, playing to the local, patch ticket crew. And, so we've been playing together and been friends for years. Yeah, when Stryker came out, I remember there was, I went to their album, I went to all their album release shows because, like I said, we're good friends. I'll play together and stuff. And, it was just badass. Like, I remember the Eyes in the Night album release show here at the venue called Starlight Room, and it was just like super badass. I remember being in the crowd watching it. I was like, oh fuck yeah, this is awesome. And it was great too because it was there was a lot of sort of hype around the band. They got signed to a German label called Iron Codex, which was really cool because at the time none of our we're all young musicians and nobody's signed to a label or made that jump yet to sort of professional music industry status. So it was really cool to see a local band do that, and they were getting success. They were playing European festivals and stuff. So it was just super cool to be around that. And then, it's hard to say no when an opportunity to play in a band like that comes along. It's like, hey man, you want to do this? It's like, oh yeah. I mean, that's what I want to do for my whole life. Right. So that's
you were basically
why we all joined.
You were waiting for the invite.
Yeah, so to speak. I mean, I was in a different band at the time called Cobra and the Lotus, which is from Calgary, which is, I guess, the next nearest city. And so we've been doing like big tours as well and stuff. But it was really cool when they asked me, and I was like, oh, hell yeah, sign me up.
And now you've become the second longest tenured member in the band.
Yeah, look at me now.
So I've wrapped up everything I could possibly. I mean, I could ask you a lot more, but I know you're under time constraints. And I will see you in May when you're in Brooklyn for the third time. And,
Awesome.
I will seek you out before you go on stage, and we'll talk a little bit. And it's been a great pleasure. I think Mark wants to maybe wrap up a few things with you.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say thanks for joining us. It was great. I know Tom really enjoyed us because he is just a huge Striker fan. He's talked about you guys for a long time to me.
From day one.
So I know it's great for him to be able to talk to you. And we appreciate your time. I know you got to get going. You got to get out on tour soon. And where can everybody who wants to find out about the band? Do you have a website that they can visit?
Yeah, our website is striker-metal.com, and so that's our handle on all social media and stuff. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, we're on it. We're on all the major music platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, whatever it is, we're on it. So yeah, check it out. We'll have new music coming. We should have we have a warm-up show in Toronto on March 5th. And I think we'll have a new song out for that. So we'll have a new song out in just a week or two here. So keep your eyes and ears open for that.
Will.
Then we'll have another one right before the Beast of Black tour starts.
Excellent. Good stuff. Well, thanks a lot, Tim. We appreciate it. And we'll definitely be plugging all your social sites there on our site. And thanks again.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to having a drinky poo with you guys.
I definitely will see you in May.
Sipping some beers.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Take care, Tim.
Be well. Good luck on the tour.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
All right. Bye.